The message from the International Panel on Climate Change is clear. We need to do more and we need to do it faster. But I'm not a climate scientist, I'm not a renewable energy expert, I'm not a sustainability expert. So I found myself asking, what can I do? What real contribution can I make to climate action? I am a local government executive director and I'm in charge of people and culture functions, data, digital, customer service and service improvement. And I have some particular expertise in coaching, organisational development and leadership development. So, when the opportunity came to run a leadership development program for female emerging leaders, I jumped at it. I also decided to research the program to actually see whether it worked. And I did this work in conjunction with the University of Sydney. Now, like many cities around the world, our city, my city, the City of Sydney, has declared a climate emergency. And for me, one of those things it means is that we need more hands on deck. We need more leaders who are willing to take up the call to action across disciplines, across regions and across cities. And really importantly, it means we need more future leaders, and we need to help those future leaders fast track their development because we don't have that much time. Now, if we don't support these emerging climate leaders, I do fear that they'll become disillusioned, they may burn out, or they may give up. And that would be detrimental to them, and it would be detrimental to our planet. But if we do support these future leaders, if we can support these change leaders to become more impactful, to become more influential, to become more effective, then of course this will accelerate climate action. The Women for Climate program is an initiative of C40. It aims to empower early and mid-career professionals to become the next generation of future leaders. To really take those professionals who are concerned, or maybe concerned advocates, and turn them into future leaders for climate. For the Sydney chapter, I recruited 20 emerging female leaders from across all of metropolitan Sydney. And I paired them with 20 very prominent, often many of them being CEOs, prominent women who had a track record in climate action. And they became their mentors. And the women came from across the public, the private and not-for-profit sectors. Now, I like to think that our program was unique. It was a 12-month program because it focused on the leadership capabilities that I felt that were really necessary for emerging leaders to navigate through this very complex area of policy and change. So what was that? So I'd like to take you through the program using the example of one of the participants, and let's call her Demi. It's very close to her real name. Demi was 30 years old and she was a sustainability coordinator working in a local government area on the outskirts of Sydney, in one of the poorer areas. And when she entered the program, she was just super passionate and energetic, but she was starting to get disillusioned and a bit dispirited because she felt that her senior managers were really not taking her work as seriously as she'd liked. They weren't investing in it as much as she'd hoped. She was starting to get this feeling that they didn't care about the climate crisis as much as she did. Demi was matched with an amazing mentor called Blake. She's the CEO of a not-for-profit organisation in Australia, a sustainability NGO, who was a very effective spokesperson, media spokesperson, and an advocate. And Blake really provided her with both emotional and practical support, but more importantly, presented a positive role model in terms of change over the long haul. Now, together with the other 19 participants, Demi undertook a group program that was really targeted at 3 key leadership attributes. And I want to talk you through those leadership attributes because I think that they're relevant for all types of complex policy change. The first one was the ability to influence and be influential. So now we know that influence is incredibly important in all environmental and social change, particularly where the problems are complex. And we often talk about complex adaptive problems, but what does that really mean? Influential people not only can spread ideas, but they also, of course, can influence how policies and programs are adopted. And we also know that climate solutions are rarely undertaken by one person. They're way beyond the direct control of individuals. And so they usually, to be effective, have to be done in terms of partnerships, coalitions, alliances, etc. So we knew that our emerging leaders needed to know how to influence and how to persuade people, not just be effective professionals themselves. That's just not enough. It doesn't cut it. Influence is also gendered. Yes, it still is. It's changing, but female voices are heard and female actions are seen differently. And so it was really important that we looked at the gendered aspect of influence for these younger women. In our program, we used the Stephen Covey's model of control, influence and concern. It's probably familiar to you. And recognising that, in fact, the control sphere had very little to do with what they were doing in climate action because, of course, it was beyond their direct control. We really worked on expanding that second sphere. How could they expand their sphere of influence? Now, for Demi and the other participants, this was an amazingly important idea, and it was very empowering because it meant that they could let go of the idea that they had to be an expert in everything, control everything, and in fact, they could be most effective by working with and through other people. The second key attribute was a concept called self-efficacy, and this is really the concept of a self-belief that we have that our actions will lead to an outcome. That through our efforts, we can make change. And as human beings, if we don't believe our efforts can lead to an outcome, we usually give up. And that is a very common phenomenon in the area of people concerned in climate change. It can lead to feelings of doubt in your ability to get anywhere and sometimes lead to feelings of helplessness or futility. So the program exposed the women to realistic yet successful role models, as I talked about, and they also undertook a project, 12-month projects, to provide them with some direct mastery experience. The third area was psychological well-being, the third attribute. Now, the psychological and the health literature is really clear that climate change is having a negative impact on people's mental health and well-being. And it can lead to feelings of depression, hopelessness, anger, anxiety, and there are even new terms for this: eco-anxiety, climate distress. And guess who is most exposed? Women more than men, people aged under 35, those who hold pro-environmental values, and those who work in a sustainability or environmental related area. The direct cohort that we were working with. So we really knew that we needed to protect the psychological well-being of these emerging leaders as they took on the good fight. Now, I said at the beginning that this was also a research study. So what were the results? So over 12 months, I examined whether, in fact, these types of programs did lead to an increase in influence, self-efficacy, and psychological well-being. When looked at the pre and post standardised measures, indeed, there was an increase of self-efficacy and influence. Surprisingly, there was not an increase in psychological well-being, and I'm happy to unpack that with you. It may have been because of COVID and the effects in mental health, but there may have been some other explanations going on as well. But the qualitative data that we also collected did support this. So it said two things had changed. Firstly, the women's perception of themselves had changed. They felt more confident, more skilled, more assertive. And secondly, their relationship with other people had changed. So they had expanded networks, they had increased recognition and increased status. All good things for tackling a complex problem. So what's the takeout? I started by saying that the climate emergency needs more hands on deck. Now, you, like me, might be asking yourselves, what can I do? I think that supporting the next generation of climate leaders, mentoring them, investing in their programs, nurturing them, is one way that we can all contribute to that. And I would really urge you to consider how you can do that in your own sphere of influence. Or if you are a young person, an emerging climate leader, how can you get that support? Thank you.